There's a rumor going around this week, the kind that would normally set an entire fanbase ablaze, suggesting Harry has been texting someone else. And honestly, the genuinely surprising part in all of this isn't the rumor itself. It's how few people, watching from the outside, actually seem shocked by the idea at all.
They really hate each other now, and they cannot hide it anymore.
I want to be upfront about something before we go any further. There's no real evidence behind this specific claim, and I'm not going to spend this video chasing a name or pointing fingers at anyone based on a single party photo. That's not what tonight is actually about. What's genuinely interesting isn't whether the rumor is true. It's the reaction to it, and what that reaction tells you about a full year of accumulated signals that a lot of people had already quietly clocked long before any text messages entered the conversation.
Was the villain.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her.
So let's actually walk through that entire year properly, and in order, because I think it explains the current reaction considerably better than any single unverified rumor ever could on its own merits. Before Meghan, there was Chelsea Davy, the one relationship where, by most accounts, Harry genuinely seemed happy rather than just performing happiness for cameras. She grew up in Zimbabwe, reportedly cared very little about palace protocol or formal royal life, and the two of them were together, on and off, for close to 7 years. Here's what makes that relationship relevant to this current story. Harry himself has spoken about it under oath in court, not once, but twice. During his privacy case testimony, he didn't lead with legal principle or abstract argument about press conduct.
He was madly in love. The veil is now lifting.
He led with her specifically, describing what he characterized as the press effectively poisoning the one relationship that had genuinely made him happy. He described the paranoia that came with it, the sense of being constantly watched, a tracking device that reportedly turned up on her car, private disagreements that ended up in newspapers, and a particularly cruel headline that celebrated their eventual breakup like a sporting win. He's also said that same experience left him suspicious of people in his own social circle more broadly. During this year's Daily Mail case specifically, he used the word nightmare to describe what happened to that relationship. His word, not a paraphrase. And in his own memoir, he went even further, essentially acknowledging that he couldn't bring himself to pull Chelsea fully into that life, out of fear the press would relentlessly pursue her, and that if he genuinely had the choice, he might not have wanted that royal life himself either.
These are the two photos of the women that people are speculating that could be the woman for Harry.
There's something worth pausing on here specifically, because I think it's the most important detail in this entire opening section. Harry didn't write about Chelsea in passing, as a footnote to a longer story about his royal life. He returned to her specifically, repeatedly, in a courtroom under oath, and in his own carefully edited memoir, at the exact moments he was making his most serious public case against the press. That's not incidental. When someone keeps returning to the same specific loss across multiple separate high-stakes public moments, it usually tells you something about how central that loss actually remains to their own understanding of themselves, even years after the fact. Sit with that for a second, because it's a fairly significant admission when you actually read it slowly and take it at face value. Here's a man on the record saying he might have walked away from the entire institution if circumstances had allowed it, that the machine surrounding royal life reportedly cost him a relationship that mattered to him. And Chelsea wasn't even the only one. Cressida Bonas, who dated Harry immediately after, reportedly made a similar calculation, took one real look at what royal life actually involved and chose to step away from it entirely.
I knew Meghan for a bit before she met Harry. Did exactly the same to me, She did that to many people that she knew, that she'd either worked with or was friends with or whatever. It just seems to me she's what I would call a ruthless social climber, who just when people are no longer appropriate parts of her circle, they have to be expunged quickly so she can move on up the ladder.
Absolutely.
Here's the detail that a lot of people find genuinely striking in hindsight. Chelsea didn't disappear from the story bitterly. She actually attended the 2018 wedding, sitting in the chapel, smiling for cameras along with everyone else, watching Harry marry Meghan. The woman who reportedly made him happiest sat there and watched him commit to exactly the kind of public, media-saturated life he'd once said he wanted to spare her from. There's also something worth naming about the specific detail of Chelsea attending the wedding, sitting there peacefully rather than staying away out of bitterness. It suggests, at minimum, that whatever happened between them, it didn't end in the kind of lasting resentment that sometimes defines these very public relationship histories. She showed up, participated in the day gracefully, and by most accounts has continued living a fairly private life since, largely outside the media glare Harry once feared would follow her permanently. In a strange way, her ability to step fully away from that world and build something quieter afterward stands as its own kind of quiet commentary on the path Harry ultimately chose instead.
Do you think your sister, Meghan Markle, has ruined Prince Harry?
The answer is yes. I mean, every single interview, every single picture, every place they go, Meghan grabs him. Meghan controls him. Meghan tells him no. Meghan stands in front of him. She controls every single situation like she is the star. And she's turned Prince Harry into a man of non-substance, for her own well-being.
If you're finding this breakdown genuinely interesting so far, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep putting together these deeper timelines instead of just chasing whatever single headline happens to be trending this week. Now let's talk about a specific moment from last autumn that a lot of people point to as a real turning point in public perception, because I think it's worth examining carefully, rather than just repeating the outrage around it. During Paris Fashion Week, while there for the Balenciaga show, Meghan posted a short clip to her own Instagram. Nighttime, in the back of a car, city lights passing by the window, her own feet up on the seat as she filmed her shoes while cruising through the city. The reason that specific clip generated the reaction it did, the route reportedly took her along the river, close to the underpass where Harry's mother died decades earlier, at night, in circumstances involving pursuing photographers. A representative later said she hadn't realized how close the route was to that specific location. I want to be fair here and hold two things simultaneously because I think that's the honest way to handle it.
The girl, woman, girlfriend, friend, however you want to put it, and I'm putting it like this for legal reasons, resides, and I'm not going to say if it's actually in Montecito or near Montecito, but it's in the environs. People have seen them together. Oh dear, my goodness, Harry's growing. Is it a backbone? Or, my goodness, maybe he's not going to be able to juggle those balls outside of windows anymore, because maybe they're going to be attached instead of detached. That would be progress, wouldn't it?
It's genuinely possible she had no idea of the exact geography. Paris is a large city, and knowing the precise location of a decades-old tragedy while riding through it at night isn't automatically something everyone would register in the moment. It's also possible, as critics have argued, that the timing and content read as tone-deaf regardless of intent, especially given the specific emotional weight this exact subject, cars, cameras, his mother, has carried for Harry publicly for years. Even commentators who are typically more sympathetic toward Meghan reportedly struggled to fully explain the choice, with one openly saying he simply couldn't understand what she'd been thinking in that specific moment. What makes the moment land as hard as it apparently did for a lot of viewers is the contrast with something Harry himself has said publicly. He's previously described a paparazzi car chase in New York as something that left him genuinely frightened, specifically because of how closely it echoed the circumstances of his mother's death. That's how raw this particular subject reportedly remains for him.
Yeah, he loved her a lot, and she really loved him, and they had great fun together. And he liked it because she wasn't worried about the royal family. That wasn't a big deal for her. She just fitted in very easily.
And there's his wife, in the back of a car in Paris, filming her shoes for social media on a stretch of road carrying exactly that history. There's a broader point worth making about the Paris moment that I think extends beyond just this one specific clip. Public figures operate under a genuinely difficult standard where intent and impact frequently diverge, and where the gap between the two gets judged almost entirely by outside observers who weren't actually present for the decision-making in the moment. It's entirely possible the sequence of events was genuinely as innocent as the official explanation suggests. A route chosen by a driver, not by Meghan herself, through a city she doesn't know intimately, at a time when her attention was reasonably focused on filming content for an entirely unrelated purpose.
Totally miserable, totally allowing his negative past to take over him, all of these court battles, and just a great sense of sadness, actually, and anger connected to him.
It's also entirely possible that a team responsible for managing her public image should have caught the potential optics before the content ever went live, regardless of her own personal awareness of the specific geography in the moment. Both of those things can be true simultaneously, and I think the honest read here sits somewhere in that uncomfortable middle ground rather than at either extreme. Now, let's talk about the calendars specifically, because I think this is genuinely the more concrete evidence sitting inside this entire story, separate from any single controversial clip or contested interpretation of intent. If you want to actually gauge the state of a relationship, the schedule tends to tell you more than any official statement ever will. And this year, their two calendars have barely overlapped. In May alone, Meghan reportedly traveled to Geneva solo for a major speaking engagement, and to Chicago solo just days before that. No Harry, no children, just her own separate public life continuing to build out. That's part of a broader pattern rather than an isolated instance. Solo appearances at galas, red carpets, tribute events, with the seat beside her consistently empty where a partner might otherwise be.
Nothing can actually get through to him to be happy now. He just feels it. It's everything's wrong.
One tabloid estimate suggested Harry hadn't been publicly seen alongside her in over 40 days. Worth taking any single tabloid number with real skepticism, but the general pattern it's pointing at has been fairly consistently observed across multiple outlets. There's also been talk of a potential vow renewal floated at some point, which is worth noting for what it implies on its own. Couples don't typically reach for that kind of gesture, unless the original commitment has started to feel like it needs reinforcing. And the pattern runs in both directions.
So he started having affairs with all sorts of other girls, and she got very upset, and he didn't go and see her for a long time, so she went off and left him. Now that's his fault, 100% his fault.
Harry keeps returning to Britain without her. This trip, the one before it, and the one before that. He's reportedly declined staying in royal accommodation during some of these visits. The stated explanation has consistently centered on the ongoing security dispute, and that's worth taking at face value as a real, documented concern rather than dismissing outright. But it's also fair to note the apparent inconsistency. The same security situation that reportedly prevents his family from joining him doesn't prevent him personally from making the trip repeatedly on his own. He's said publicly, more than once, that he wants to bring Meghan and the children to visit. The visits keep not happening in that combined form regardless.
Prince Harry is heartbroken all over again. Now, of course, this is something that he is never going to admit publicly, especially as his marriage to Meghan Markle crumbled.
It's worth acknowledging directly that busy, high-profile couples maintaining separate professional calendars isn't automatically evidence of a struggling marriage on its own. Plenty of genuinely happy, functional relationships involve two people with demanding, independent careers who simply don't attend every single event together. Because that's not realistically how modern professional life tends to work for anyone operating at this level of public visibility. The specific concern critics raise here isn't the mere existence of separate schedules. It's the near total absence of joint appearances specifically, combined with the broader context of everything else surrounding this particular year, that shifts the read from ordinary busy couple logistics into something that reads, to a lot of observers, as considerably more pointed. None of this actually started with any rumor about another person entering the picture either, which I think matters for understanding the full timeline properly.
Simmering tension between the duplicitous Duke and his facelift-enhanced wife. Here's the red carpet arrival.
Hey, Harry, when you go upstairs?
A couple of years back, Harry and Meghan reportedly restructured their public-facing operations into more separate lanes. Different social media accounts, her Netflix and lifestyle ventures running on one track, his Invictus and Polo commitments running on another. It was generally described at the time as a professional restructuring, amicable and sensible. But it's worth noting plainly that people don't typically formalize that kind of operational separation from someone they're still fully, uncomplicatedly aligned with in every other sense. It's also fair to note that the same restructuring pattern, separate accounts, separate business ventures, separate branding, appears fairly often among high-profile couples navigating two independent, demanding careers simultaneously, and doesn't automatically signal relationship trouble on its own, in every case where it happens.
This is gross and grim and deranged on every level.
What makes this specific instance read differently to a lot of observers is the timing relative to everything else already circulating about the state of the marriage, rather than the restructuring itself being inherently suspicious in isolation. Now here's where I want to walk carefully through the harsher commentary that's circulated publicly about this marriage over the past year, because I think it genuinely deserves to be presented with appropriate context rather than simply repeated at face value without scrutiny. Several prominent media figures and commentators have used genuinely harsh language to describe Meghan specifically. One well-known television host has used the term malignant narcissist on air. Harry's own biographers have described her, in their assessment, as one of the most bitter and unreconciled public figures they've encountered in their careers.
How about having some thought towards your husband's feelings when you're in the same city his mom died in, running around having a joyride in Paris near where she lost her life?
Reports have suggested even Harry's own uncle characterized her in similarly unflattering terms. I want to be honest about how to weigh that kind of commentary. These are strong, personal characterizations made by people with varying degrees of actual insider access, some of whom have their own long-standing critical relationship with the Sussex operation generally. That doesn't automatically make the characterizations false, but it also doesn't make them settled fact simply because multiple people have independently arrived at similar language. What's harder to dismiss is a more specific, verifiable detail. Harry reportedly felt compelled to publicly deny a report suggesting Meghan talks over him during his own meetings. That's the kind of denial that typically only becomes necessary when a claim has already gained enough traction publicly that silence would be read as confirmation.
Especially when he's on the BBC saying that it's not safe enough for my family in the UK, but it's safe enough for Meghan to be alone in Paris, literally engaging with the paparazzi you say killed your mother.
It's also worth remembering, before moving on, that these commentators exist on a spectrum ranging from genuinely close royal-watching journalists with real sourcing, to entertainment personalities offering opinion for engagement, to people with long-documented personal grievances against this specific couple. Treating every single quote with equal weight, regardless of the source's actual proximity or credibility, risks flattening what should really be a more careful source-by-source evaluation into a single, undifferentiated wall of criticism. There's also the homesickness thread running through a lot of recent commentary specifically, which I genuinely think is worth taking seriously in its own right, regardless of how you personally feel about the broader marriage question at the center of tonight's story. Harry has written publicly about Britain remaining, in his words, the country he proudly served. Language that a number of royal commentators, including some who are consistently critical of him, have read as genuinely wistful rather than simply diplomatic. Some have gone further, describing him as isolated in California, waiting on contact from his brother that hasn't come. People who've known him for decades have reportedly noted a real shift in his demeanor, describing someone more guarded, more careful, further removed from the more easygoing public persona that defined his earlier years.
Wants to showcase that image to the world that she is the one who's the boss, but she's not really the boss.
It's also fair to acknowledge that homesickness for one's country of origin, even after a deliberate and considered decision to leave it, is a genuinely common and entirely human experience that doesn't necessarily imply regret about every associated life choice made along the way. People can miss a place, a role, a familiar routine, while still standing firmly behind the broader reasons they chose to walk away from it in the first place. Reading every wistful comment as evidence of total regret about the entire marriage specifically may be overreaching the actual evidence somewhat, even if the underlying homesickness itself appears genuine. Which brings us back, finally, to this week's specific rumor, and I think the fuller context we've just walked through explains the public reaction to it considerably better than the bare rumor itself ever could on its own.
She tries to direct and show people what to do because she's a controller. And that's what we see in her body language. That is her showing control because she is control obsessed.
The claim circulating is that Meghan discovered messages suggesting another relationship involving someone roughly Harry's own age, and that this development is somehow connected to his renewed interest in spending time back in Britain. A name has been floating around online, tied to a single photograph from an event. I'm deliberately not repeating that name here, because there's genuinely no solid evidence connecting her to any of this, and it would be unfair to attach someone's identity to an unverified rumor without real substantiation. What's actually notable isn't the rumor itself, it's the specific tone of the public reaction to it. Comment sections responding to this story didn't skew sympathetic or shocked. One of the most widely liked responses was simply someone asking bluntly who would actually want to be with Harry at this point. Not even specifically defending Meghan, just genuinely questioning the premise.
When you start to see a marriage break down the way Harry and Meghan's marriage has clearly broken down, you start to speculate on what could be going on. and it would make sense.
Other highly liked comments expressed a similar sentiment in harsher terms, and there's been a fair amount of commentary framing this entire situation with a certain grim irony, given the years Meghan spent building a public narrative around love and partnership. There's a final thought worth adding before we get to where this actually leaves us. It's genuinely possible that the specific rumor circulating this week turns out to be entirely unfounded. A case of mistaken assumptions built around a single ambiguous photograph and a general climate of speculation that was already primed to believe the worst about this particular relationship. If that turns out to be the case, it wouldn't actually undo any of the documented pattern we've walked through tonight. The separate calendars, the Chelsea history, the specific commentary from people with real proximity to this family. It would simply mean this particular thread of the broader story wasn't the one that turned out to be accurate. So where does all of this actually leave the story once you strip away this week's specific headline and look at the fuller picture underneath it? For years, the dominant public narrative positioned Meghan as the driving force and Harry as the grateful partner along for the ride.
I don't think Meghan is happy at all. How could she be? I mean, look, the girl's whole has ever is crumbled. Harry's talking about going back. How does Meghan feel about that? I heard that she wants to go back. No, she don't. No, she doesn't. I mean, look, this girl is trying to do everything she can to have an independent life with a career in Hollywood. That's what she's going after. That's what she wants.
This week's rumor, regardless of whether it's ultimately confirmed or debunked, has at least temporarily flipped that framing. Now it's Harry being discussed as the one potentially keeping secrets, the one reportedly homesick, the one apparently building distance from a life that's increasingly centered somewhere he isn't. Whether there's actually another person involved matters less, honestly, than what the surrounding evidence already independently suggests. A relationship with visibly separate calendars, a well-documented history of Harry associating specific romantic loss with the institution he eventually chose to leave, and a pattern of public commentary from people across a wide range of relationships to this couple, consistently describing distance and disconnection rather than partnership. None of this constitutes proof that the marriage is ending. People stay together through genuinely difficult stretches all the time, and public perception from the outside is often a poor guide to what's actually happening privately between two people. But the specific combination of factors here, the calendar gaps, the documented history with Chelsea Davy, and what he's said about that loss, the commentary from people with actual proximity to this family, the Paris moment and what it reportedly revealed about awareness or carelessness, adds up to something that a lot of observers were already discussing well before this particular week's rumor gave it a fresh headline. What do you genuinely think? Is this the actual beginning of something serious for this particular marriage? Or is the internet collectively reading far too much into one unverified rumor, layered on top of the kind of ordinary marital distance that plenty of long-term relationships experience at some point without it ever becoming an ending? I'd genuinely love to hear where you personally land on this one, because I think reasonable, well-informed people can look at the exact same evidence we've walked through tonight and reach fairly different conclusions about it. So drop your honest take down in the comments below and let's actually talk about it. And if you've genuinely made it this far with me and you're enjoying this kind of careful deep dive into the actual pattern sitting behind the headlines rather than just the headline itself, do me one favor before you go. Hit subscribe on Palace Insider so you don't miss the next one. And if this particular breakdown gave you something worth thinking about, drop a like on your way out. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about getting the fuller story rather than just the loudest version of it. I'll see you in the next one.